Good morning. I am Brianna Gillmore. I'm the RMC's financial associate. I started in October 2022, right at the peak of the RMC's craziness. So that was really fun to start my job. Um, but when I started, I was kind of handed a lot of my materials and things um, with no direction, and I had nowhere to turn, no one to ask questions to really. So it was kind of hit the ground running and figure it out as you go. And so in the last 2.5 years, I've learned a lot. And I've also learned that there's not a whole lot of resources and training for our awesome treasurers that I get to talk to on a regular basis. And so I wanted to put together this first meeting basically just to kind of hear from you all about what you would like done for a treasurer training and maybe what you guys want to learn more about. And so that's kind of what I'm going to do. I do have a small presentation to kind of go over just some best practices and just some basic information that maybe you guys should know if you don't already know it. I want to say thank you guys for attending today. I really appreciate it. This is the first time I'm doing anything like this under Erin's direction. So she is encouraging me to do this and put myself out there. So thank you guys for coming. I also would like to point out I pride myself on blind carbon copying people and not having people get a million emails. So I apologize that that email somehow got CC'd instead of BCC'd. I I was mortified because that's one of my things that I hate when people do that to me. So sorry about that. I am going to start with my little presentation here. Okay, can everybody see my fun little yellow screen here? Okay, great. First, I just want to talk about the role of the treasurer. Uh, the treasurer is one of those central leaders of your congregation, and a lot of times people just say, "Oh, you're just the treasurer," but there's a lot of big and small responsibilities that come with being a treasurer. Uh, you are basically monitoring the big picture as well as paying attention to those small details. You are called upon to explain the church's financial resources, and you're assisting the members of the congregation as they make decisions about the mission and ministry of your church. You're also responsible for making sure that all financial details are handled with accuracy. These are just a few of your responsibilities as treasurer. The first being recording contributions. This seems to be a big part of your job. And it also is very important that you're establishing and recording those contributions accurately. There needs to be some sort of system in place, however you're recording these. If you do not have a system in place, towards the end, I'll kind of show you what I do for the RMC. I'll show you kind of my system that I have. And you should also be storing those contributions by having either a physical copy or an online copy of the checks and deposit slips that you're putting in. You're also responsible for paying bills. This is also kind of tied with recording contributions. There should be an established procedure for bill paying system. I do have a slide where I kind of go into more detail about paying your bills. So we'll go over that a little bit more. You're also in charge of issuing paychecks unless there's a specific payroll department or a separate payroll person. As the treasurer, you are legally responsible for compliance with federal and state requirements for payroll reporting and withholding and payments to contractors. Most churches will have a separate payroll person or a separate payroll company that they are using. This is basically one of those delegated things that a treasurer kind of has. I will say one thing that you will probably be in charge of that's not done by a payroll person is tracking down people that need a 1099 and having them fill out those forms. That is usually not done by a payroll person, just because they a lot of times don't have all that contact information. So that is something that even if you're not doing payroll, you may be expected to track down those 1099 contractors. You're also in charge of filing mandatory reports. This includes state and local reports. It is different for every state and it's different for every local region. So just make sure that you know what reports you need to be doing and that they're filed on time. And then if you're not giving reports to your church's board, you should be. It's one of those things that it is your job to keep your board informed. So whether or not that's just giving them a balance sheet or a profit and loss statement or both, updating your budget, those kinds of things, you should be giving reports to your board. If you're only doing it annually, it's not enough. Because inevitably, if you're doing it annually, there's going to be mistakes and it's going to be a big headache. So I suggest doing reports quarterly at least. Personally, for the RMC, I am doing reports every month. I do end of month reports at the very beginning of the following month. This has helped me tremendously in my position. Before, I don't know, Kari helped me, but I took over, I think, April last year. So it's been almost a year. And before that, we had a separate bookkeeping company that was doing the reports. And honestly, it wasn't good. And so I was finding a lot of errors. Kari and Teresa were finding a lot of errors. Since kind of taking over and doing monthly reports, there are less headaches in the long run. So it depends on how big your church is too. If you have a small congregation, quarterly is totally fine. It really depends on how big your congregation is. Sorry, that was my soapbox on reporting.
Brianna, I wasn't sure how we could ask questions or if we should wait.
No, that's fine.
What do you mean by state and local reports?
So sometimes you may have like Denver has different what are they called? Permits that we have to file and fill out. Every year I have to do like a building assessment report. Now that we've sold our building, it's going to be different. Each county, each state is going to have their own requirements for physical locations, and it's up to the treasurer to kind of fill those out. You can do it in tandem with maybe like an office person. They tend to ask a lot of financial questions. And then sometimes they'll ask questions that I don't know that is really for like an administrative person. So we kind of work together to get those done. State, I think the biggest one that comes to mind would be the FAMIL. And that's for Colorado. I don't know outside of Colorado, like Utah and Wyoming, kind of what those state ones look like. You would maybe have to reach out to your office person to ask which forms need to be done.
There's also Family for Colorado has a really robust website, so you can get information there.
Yeah.
Another one, I was treasurer for a couple of years, then I haven't been the last 2 years, and I just came back on in February. And I remember before we had a payroll, so we use Sure Payroll, but before that, there are the the forms you have to file both federal and state for the withholding.
Yeah. So there's it really again, this is another one that's like, it's hard for me to kind of train on the state and local reports because every place is a little bit different. But even if you are, obviously most, if not all, are nonprofit 501(c) churches. So there's not a lot of like tax stuff that you're doing, but you still have to fill out a lot of these forms that say you're a 501(c) or you're a nonprofit. So those will come across, and those are essentially the treasurer's responsibility. But like I said, a lot of times churches will kind of hand it over to an admin. But it just depends on how you guys are structured.
Okay, thanks.
And then moving on to taxes. I am not a tax expert. That is not my specialty. I will admit that right now. The biggest thing that you'll kind of have to pay attention to are those payroll taxes if you're doing payroll. And then any other taxes that you're responsible for. But again, if you're a 501(c), there shouldn't be a whole lot that you are dealing with other than those exempt forms. And then lastly, it's your responsibility to establish procedures. So if you don't have a formal policy or procedure in place, I highly suggest getting something down in writing so that it can be followed from treasurer to treasurer. If there's already something in place, you can definitely tweak those policies and procedures with obviously the approval of your board. But this just ensures that funds are adequately safeguarded, files are organized and maintained. You are in a position that deals with money. You want to cover your own butts, if you will. You want to make sure that no one ever questions what you're doing. So having those established policies and procedures in place will not only help you, but save the church too. And I will talk a little bit more about how I, have done for the contributions and paying bills, just kind of those procedures. And then we'll talk a little bit about record retention. But my biggest...
I have a comment or question.
Yeah.
When you get to that section later, I'm also wanting to get advice on different vendor systems for these things and what a best practice looks like. Like, for instance, Payroll Vault, Bill.com, and, working with a bookkeeper. Like, the issue I'm coming across is the most financially efficient way to generate reports externally, and then also integrating the paying of bills, understanding it depends on church to church, but it's one of those things where you come into the position and you're inheriting what's there and then trying to understand why it's there in that way, right? So if we could touch on that later, that would be great.
Yep. I'm going to go over a lot of that. So, okay, so that's just a role of the treasurer. I just want to just really fast say, a lot of churches, depending on their size, will delegate some of these tasks so that they can focus a little bit more on the bigger picture items. And that's okay, but there needs to be a clear, roles need to be defined clearly, and it needs to be kind of close to the chest. You don't want 7 different signers in your church, right? You want 1 or 2. You need 1 person that's signing bills, not 7, So you can delegate these tasks, but it needs to be very clearly written out, and you need to be aware of who's doing what. And if someone's coming out of that role, then you need to be able to put somebody back into the role so that you're not down to just one signer. I've run into many churches who, somebody gets sick or somebody passes away, and they're kind of in a bind because they don't have some of these policies and procedures in place for who they delegated tasks to. This is just talking about receiving contributions. I kind of talked a little bit about this, contributions from individuals. This is, people within your church that are just giving you pledges or whatever. You need to have at least an annual contribution statement for them. This is usually like the first or second week of January is probably the best time, just because that's right before they need things for tax purposes. But I highly suggest that you're sending out quarterly statements to your congregation and just individuals who are sending to your church. This helps, again, kind of button up any mistakes that may have been made. Maybe they thought that they gave you $200, but they only wrote the check for $20. So you want to be able to catch those mistakes before you're doing your annual cleanup. Accounting for contributions. This is a big one. Restricted versus unrestricted funds. If they write in the memo or they send a letter that says that this has to go towards the California fires, it has to go to the California fires. If they write down that this is just for the general fund, it gets to go in the general fund and you get to do whatever you want with it. As a church, this is one of those things that can get messy. So you want to make sure that you are allocating those funds into the correct places. And then also if it's a pass-through thing, like if it is for the California fires, getting those funds to where they're supposed to go in a timely fashion. I'm going to skip online donations for just 1 second. I'm going to come down here. Annual campaigns. If for any reason your church is going to do some sort of fundraising activity, you as the treasurer are kind of the head of that fundraising activity. Maybe not the planning of the party or whatever it is, but you're in charge of all the financial matters. This is a good way for you guys to, raise some extra funds for your churches. But it is a big take on. So just be prepared that if your church is like, guess what, we're doing a dinner, you're going to have a little bit more of a workload when it comes to those things. Planned giving is really gifts to the church from wills and trusts. These don't happen a whole lot, but they will pop up here and there. And you just need to be aware of if they're donating, $10,000 to your church when they pass away, are there stipulations involved with that money? So there should be some sort of documentation that's coming with that check that tells you what it can and cannot be used for. So you just really need to pay attention to those planned giving ideas there. And then online donations. So there are many different platforms. I would love for all of you, if you are doing online giving, whether it's through Tidely or Vanco or something else, to put in the chat what is working well for you. So what online giving is working. I have had a lot of questions about what platforms to use. I can tell you that the RMC uses Tidely. It's not my favorite, but it's not the worst. So I'm curious, I can give you ideas and I can tell you different platforms that other churches are using. But I'm curious if anyone has anything that's working well. I would point out that a lot of these online donation platforms do take some sort of a fee. And there's not a whole lot that doesn't. So I was trying to think. We use something called Zephy instead of like Eventbrite when we're doing like some sort of, like annual celebration. We're going to use Zephy this year because it's a nonprofit organization. So we're able to accept money and there's no fees taken out from that. But I'm just curious on like a day-to-day basis, what people are using.
We use, I don't know if this is the right answer, but Fellowship One Go and Fellowship One Giving, including text to give. And then we also added Venmo as a convenient option for members. But we do add a percentage for those fees. So if you could provide information on Zepi and how you guys like it afterwards, that
Yeah.
would be super helpful, because I think anytime we can have our money going to causes that we know our members feel strongly about, I know my congregants will respond, positively about that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so UCC giving, I have a whole slide all about the different UCC givings. I did have quite a few new treasurers who started just in January that did not know about the different UCC givings. And so I figured I would just kind of break them down. The UCC likes to use their acronyms, they like to shorten everything. So when I first started, I had no idea what anyone was talking about. Meetings were just full of acronyms and I was very confused. Our big one that we work with is OCWM. These funds go to the ongoing work included in the operating budget of the conference in the national setting. We send 15% to national and then 85% stays within the conference. Usually I'm working on a pledge card. We were sending them before COVID and then they kind of stopped being sent. So I am working on a pledge card to send to all of the churches. We usually ask, how much are you going to be giving for OCWM? I think most churches, if anything, that's one thing that they do give to is the OCWM. And that is also part of the 5 for 5. So if your church is a big 5 for 5 church, then you probably know what all of these are. I do have quite a few churches that have no idea what 5 for 5 is, or they just don't care what it is. OGHS is our great hour of sharing, supports international programs of health, education, and agricultural development, relief, and refugee assistance. This is most often during Lent, is when there's a big campaign within the congregations to be sent. This is a pass through. We send this direct. Everything that we get for OGHS goes directly back to national. Neighbors in Need supports ministries of justice and compassion through the U.S. This is most often done the first Sunday of October. Even though I say that this is when it's most often received, I get amounts for these all year long. So don't feel like you have to all of a sudden change how you're sending the money. I get them all year, but this is just usually when churches are doing campaigns. Strengthen the Church supports the expansion of ministry and growth of the UCC local congregations, and this is received during Pentecost Sunday. Christmas Fund provides direct financial assistance and retired and active UCC ministers, lay employees, and surviving spouses. And obviously this is received during Christmas. And then we also have our per capita, often referred to as dues. RMC dues are $15 per congregation member. This is also listed, I think, 7 places on our website. But it's $15 per member. Association dues are sent to your association. I have nothing to do with them. I don't know what your associations are charging you. I don't know anything about it. So they are completely separate from the RMC. We also do accept the disaster relief. I put that up here. This is just pass through to national as well, unless it's something local, like here we had the Boulder fires. So that was a local thing that we sent on to whoever was in charge of the Boulder fires. I'm not really sure. Most of these are pass-throughs. If you send it directly to national, I know nothing about that. So if your church is a big 5-for-5 church, I won't know that you sent money to national. So I can't give you the 5-for-5. I get yelled at annual celebration when people don't get their certificates. So it's silly, but it's better if you send it to the conference and not national. They also tend to email me and say, why are churches doing this? So that's my little spiel about UCC giving. I do have, if you guys do not have the remittance slip that should come with your checks, I have that. I can send it to anyone who still needs it. I send it with every quarterly report. I believe it's on our website, but I can send it out again. If you don't send a slip with your check, I don't know where to put that money. The amount of checks that I receive on a weekly basis that don't have a memo or a slip attached, and then I have to track down the people to find out where that goes, takes a lot of time. So that is my one gripe for all of you guys. Billing. So this is, I have a little thing that I can show you guys in a second, but expenditures should be approved by a designated lay or staff person according to your documented procedures. Policy should be in place. Some expenditures that are reoccurring could have a blanket approval. So if you have, if you're paying the same 3 bills every single month, you can have a blanket approval at the beginning of the year. And then you're just able to pay those however they need to be paid online or with a check. Others that are, random, that just kind of come in all the time, those are specific approval, need to be given in writing. And I'll kind of show you what we do in the RMC. You should have a credit card policy in place. Who can use a credit card, how much they can spend, who's approving expenses. There should be a dollar amount attached to expenses. So maybe somebody's limit is $5,000 on their credit card, but that doesn't mean that they can spend $5,000 in one sitting. So whatever your dollar amount is, whether it's $100 or $1,000, whatever that needs to be approved before being used should be in place. And then how you're tracking those expenses. So how you're getting receipts, how you're documenting, what they're using things for, all that stuff should be in place for credit cards. A 2-signature policy should be in place for a specific dollar amount. So like I was saying, if your dollar amount is $1,000, anything over that should have 2 signatures on a check or 2 signatures for the approval. Anything under your dollar amount that you have in your bylaws or your policy can only be 1 signature. I think most churches, it's, a lot of churches just do 2 signatures across the board, which is totally fine. Sometimes that's hard for, smaller churches to try and track down people to sign checks. So it's just up to whatever your congregation policy is. Your approver and signer need to be a separate person. They cannot be approving and then signing the check. That is a no-no. You will get in trouble if someone finds out that you are doing that within the state or the federal government. And then chart of accounts should be updated and easy to follow. If you don't know where something should go in your expenses under your chart of account, if you can't read it because, somebody mowed the church's lawn, but you don't know where it should go, that's a problem. You need to work on your chart of accounts. When I first started for the RMC, I could not make heads or tails of where things were supposed to go. And Teresa Campbell and I worked very hard to get our chart of accounts so that if for whatever reason I decided to quit tomorrow or I got sick, whoever came into my job can come in and look at that chart of accounts and know exactly where things are supposed to go. And Teresa just did the same thing for Wash Park, right, Peter? I'm gonna exit out of here for 1 second and show you. I have a couple master things that I can share with you all too. So this is how I do bills. So this is how I document them. This is my just master blank copy. I usually come over here and this is just on Google Sheets. I'll hit duplicate and I'll get a new one. And I usually rename it to whatever the date is for that day. Sorry, my dog is thinking someone's breaking in. So then this would be whatever week I'm working on. And then I just type in all the bills for the week and that gets sent to whoever's approving bills. This is just a quick example. I break it down into checks that need to be printed and signed. And then I also break it down into things that are going to be paid online or are automatic. So say you have John Smith and he mowed the church's lawn, whatever coding that is in your chart of accounts, building maintenance, whatever, and then the amount. Same goes for Sally Jones. She played piano one Sunday. So that would be the coding. And then obviously online stuff, Comcast, Excel, you put wherever it's supposed to go in the amount. And then whoever's approving could initial this coding sheet. I also send a scanned copy of all the bills. I have a stamp that goes out that I put down, how much it was. This says per usual, but that's just because this is our copier bill. So usually this just goes into our copier lease, and then Aaron would sign it with a date. So that's how I keep track of signing and keeping track of all those bills. Okay. Communication. This is a pet peeve of mine because when I came into the RMC, mind you, it was during a big upheaval. Things were changing rapidly within the RMC. But the previous financial associate was using an email address that was specific to her. It had her name at rmcucc.com. I still, 2.5 years later, have to check her email once a week to see and make sure that things are not going to her. I have to go through her emails on a regular basis to find, correspondence or a lease agreement that somehow, some way didn't make it to our Google Drive. So we quickly, when I started, transferred everything to a financial only email address. If you are using a personal email address to do church finances, you are going to run into issues. You're going to run into login issues. You're going to run into documentation issues. Someone ultimately is going to email you and say, well, I talked to Bob 7 years ago and he said this, and you have to stick by it because he said it. Well, I have no documentation of that. Using a financial email address allows you to consolidate all financial correspondence into one place, simplifies record keeping, safeguards the church's financial assets, and makes it easy to transfer to the next treasurer. So this is part of maybe onboarding with new treasurers or assistant treasurers or finance in your, church office. Everything should go to a financial email address. All vendor accounts should use the church address, church telephone, and church finance email. Should not be under any one person's name, under your own cell phone number should not be associated with it. There are a few exceptions. I have found there are a few websites that there is no get around. You have to put in your name, or it won't take, like we have a Zoom number. So sometimes our Zoom number doesn't work in certain websites. Those are anomalies, right? Those are like the weird cases, but 99.9% should be all church associated numbers, address, names. And then all financial files, whether paper or electronic, should be kept at the church office. And then there also needs to be some sort of a backup. So we use Google Drive and Box to do all of our digital backup. And then I have storage for all the physical files that I keep all the finance stuff together. This is another one of those soapbox things that I will stand on. That if this is not a policy in place for your church, you need to get on it. Your admin should have an admin only email, not their name or their personal email address. So, and then last thing I'm going to go over real fast is record retention. These are things that need to be permanently retained. Any audited financial statements, annual financial statements, articles of incorporation, bylaws, any correspondence that you deem that's important. So sometimes this might be like a PIN or some sort of a code or you know, something that you're going to need later on. Those are important. Emails, correspondences, deeds, mortgages, and bills of sale. Employee payroll summary for each year. You don't need to keep your payroll summaries for every pay period, but an annual report would do. IRS correspondence, your 501(c)(3), restricted gift documents, so any sort of things like wills, trusts, retirement and pension records for your staff, and then sales tax exempt certificate. Some of these things I use once a year, especially like this 501(c)(3) letter I use right around now. I'll get a few people that say I need a tax letter. And then the sales tax exempt certificate I use for big purchases and things. But for the most part, these things can be filed away and you don't really need to look at them. They can just kind of be there, but they need to be saved forever. Things that you need to save for 8 years: bank statements, contribution records and deposit slips, canceled checks, employee payroll records, insurance policies, leases for any equipment that you have, quarterly and annual payroll reports, and vendor payments. And then the things that you keep for 3 years are employment applications for those not hired and routine correspondence. I think the routine correspondence is kind of like, you know, subject to interpretation, but really, honestly, you shouldn't be deleting anything. So if you're getting an email from Bob Jones about something for, you know, the church, just have a folder in your email that says, you know, correspondence, and just throw it in there. You don't need to delete it, but just kind of put it in a folder so that it's out of your inbox. I didn't put anything on there about employment applications for those that are hired, but that would be in the 8 years. All right, and lastly, just the Q&A section now. I did have, I was going to show you all how I do my deposits. So again, this is just like my master deposit. You would write down who the check came from, the check number, how much the check was there a designation? So did this say California wildfires? Does it say OCWM? Is it just a general pledge? And then whatever the coding is in your chart of accounts. This is just the example that I use. John Smith had a check number. Check was $500. It was a March pledge. It just goes into the general pledge, whatever. There was a cash donation for $100. This is a general offering, general pledge, whatever. This could look different for you guys, but this is just how I keep track. And then I also scan all checks that come in so that I have a digital copy of every single check that we receive. If you don't have a scanner readily available, there is an app that you can put on your phone called Fast Scanner. It's free, and you take a picture with your phone and it comes out, it looks just like a regular PDF. But again, this is to protect you as the treasurer. Everything you receive gets scanned, or a photo gets taken, or whatever, so that you can document the money that's coming in. And then the same thing goes for the bill coding on the money that's going out.
I wanted to mention for scanning on through your phone, some phones like on Androids or Samsungs, you don't need an app. You just use your camera, and they have a feature that allows you to scan it. And I know that the iPhones have something like that too.
Yep.
And then Google has a feature too that puts it directly into a Google Drive if you want that. So just some more ideas there. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yes. Okay. Q&A portion. And I'm gonna do my best. If I can't answer it, I will look it up and get you an answer.
My question has to do with how a church chooses to document their uh, money. So what I'm asking, and to be clear, I am a biologist. I am not an accountant, and so I'm also not detail oriented to this degree. So I'm stretching my brain muscles a lot when I look at this stuff. My question is, if we are based on cash flow, basically, is there a best practice or questions to ask yourself in the organization to determine the best, most efficient way to document the way your money moves? Does that make sense? Like, we follow the actual cash, and then we have to do a bunch of somersaults in terms of how it goes from account to account. And so I just wanted to double check, like, is there a better way to do this? Knowing that,
What software system are you guys using?
QuickBooks and yeah, I think it's QuickBooks.
Okay. Are you using desktop or online?
Online.
Okay. I have learned when we started, we had QuickBooks Desktop, which was from like any accountant is going to tell you QuickBooks Desktop is way better. It has a lot more features, but is a lot more limited because it's on your desktop. So if anyone else wants to access it,
Yeah.
it's harder to access. You have to do like a remote in, and it's
Yes.
complicated.
Yes.
QuickBooks Online is great because anyone can log in at any time. Two people can be in it doing things. It's a lot more friendly when it comes to how many people are kind of working on things. You can also access it from any computer or tablet, right?
Yeah.
But it does require a few more steps when kind of tracking money and doing those things. Are you kind of asking like if you're entering a deposit and then where it goes, like from there?
I'm just wondering if, what is it? When a church is looking at their annual budget and they're saying, we do a cash flow method of accounting. Well, then what are the other methods and why don't we do them? Like, what's the ration? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand why people keep saying that and why we do it. Because from a layperson's perspective, I don't care what you call it. This is very confusing, um, because I actually just need the start and the end. Like, I worked at a university previously, and I would joke and saying, we are very good at laundering our money so that it comes out looking different than when it started, right? And so that's essentially what we're doing in a sense, right?
Right.
But my point is if they say we do cash flow accounting, I'm like, so what are the different methods and why is it that a church would generally?
So, my internet is going very slow. Sorry about this. I'm not quite sure why it's being slow today. I will get you, I have a document that kind of highlights the different accounting methods and why a church would pick each of the different methods.
Oh
Like,
my gosh, that would be amazing because
yes.
we're trying to increase general financial literacy among general members, right? To start grooming and training and encouraging new lay leaders. And so this is the basics that I'm trying to fortify our um, toolkits so that when they get financial information, they really don't want to pay attention because we've gone through some issues the past 12 to 18 months. And I'm like, it's not scary. It's your money. So you should know where it goes. So I feel like this would be a great uh, overarching thing
Yep.
because everyone says that's always how I've done it. And I'm so sick of
Well,
that.
I can tell you that no matter what church you are from, no matter what organization you're working for, whether it's big or small, when you start talking to someone who does not do accounting, you're going to immediately get the glazed over look and they're going to zone out and they're just going to stop listening. So just that's just how it is. And unless you're on a committee or you're on the board, they don't really care as long as it's being taken care of. You stepped up, you were the treasurer. So now they're doing this, going, well, you can take care of it. So that's just kind of, I feel like everyone in this position is going, yep, like that's exactly what happened. I agreed to take this position, but now I'm looking, 5 years in the future, no one's going to take it from me because they don't want to do this job because they know it's a hard job. And so that's why I'm trying to put together a training that kind of says, you could be the most illiterate math person, but here's a good treasurer training. Now you should be able to go in and do the books for your church. So I'm adding that. I have accounting methods and why. Yes, Peter.
You will recognize the importance of this question, Brianna. I got elected as treasurer and counted on a bookkeeper to do all this stuff for me. And then we had a change in bookkeepers, and I had to come to grips with some of the stuff that was going on. What's the balance between the treasurer and the bookkeeper, and how should folks work together on that?
Well, Peter, since
Brianna is one who stepped in as our new bookkeeper after somebody had been doing it for a dozen years, and it was a difficult transition.
I will say the biggest misconception I have found within any church organization is a lot of times the board, the pastor, the admin, whoever, they see somebody's doing the books and they think that they're doing it great and they don't question it. And I'm telling you right now that if you have a third party, you should be doing, I'm a huge proponent for monthly sit downs, but quarterly is okay if you're a smaller church. you should be getting reports from them, and you should be going over it and really paying attention to what they're doing. Because somebody who's not within the UCC or not in your church that's doing your books could be putting money where it's not supposed to go. They could be taking bills out for expenses, not from the line items that they should be coming out of. So then, say you have a youth, you have a youth program, and they're taking money out of the women's program instead of the youth program for expenses. And so it looks like the youth program doesn't have as much money, but really it's the women's program that doesn't. So being able to catch those mistakes on an at least quarterly basis is the best. And don't assume that just because you have a bookkeeper or a third party doing those books that they're doing them correctly. I can tell you right now, when I came into the RMC, the treasurer or the financial associate that we had was doing things and was not, like, no one knew what she did. Like, no one, like, every single person was like, I have no idea what this lady was doing. She was working closely with Sue, if you guys remember Sue, and Sue was not paying attention to what she was doing either. And they also had a bookkeeper who, our books were a mess when I started. I came in and I immediately started raising questions like, why is it like this? Why are you putting money here? Why are you doing this? And I started getting a little bit of pushback, like, wait, why are you asking all of these questions? And I was coming at it from someone who did mortgages before this job. So not a bookkeeper, but someone who is in the mortgage industry who has to ask all of those accounting questions when I get people's statements, like, why are you spending this? Why are you doing this? And no one could answer those questions. Our third party bookkeeper, she was like, this is just how Sue told me to do it. This is how, our former financial associate did it. And not that she was a bad person or that the former financial associate was a bad person. They weren't talking to each other. There was no communication. And nobody was doing like a checks and balances system. So when you're dealing with money, a lot of money sometimes, you have to have a checks and balance system, because you don't want to end up on the 9 o'clock news because they're accusing you of laundering money or taking money. It's an important job. It can be essentially an easy job if you let it be an easy job. But if you're not paying attention, bad things can happen. So I highly suggest some sort of finance check-in, quarterly, if not monthly, if you can make that happen, really, honestly.
It's such a relief to hear you say that, Brianna, because that was my experience of just asking questions to get information about the money I was giving to my church and the cultural reaction, basically. But really, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I did want to mention, I think Dana, you wanted to say something earlier. I wasn't sure if she still did.
Sorry, I'm not paying attention to the chat very often. Sorry.
That's okay. When you asked your first question about a cash basis, whatever information Brianna wants to send out, if she could send that out to all of us, would be great. But just as a quick and dirty, there really are two basic, and one is cash and one is accrual. And the difference between cash is like as you go, when things happen. Accrual is like you get a bill in December, then that's an accounts receivable. But if you don't pay it till January, it carries on the books that way. On a cash basis, it's just the day you pay it is what, money in, money out on the actual day. So that's just a quick and dirty, but I'm sure she has more detailed information.
I do know, I'm just curious, how many of you guys are using QuickBooks?
That was
What
another
else?
question I had, if there was the possibility of church treasurer QuickBooks basics. Like I can go online and look for videos on YouTube, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm gonna do that now because I'm also seeing the writing on the wall of how it's, but the next treasure that comes in, they don't have that. And so I'm
Mhm.
wondering, right? Like you talked about board reports. And so, um, and I don't mean to take up, more time, but
No, 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 you're
it's,
fine.
if I'm hoping this is helpful for the others as well. So if we have monthly board reports, and then we also have the what's it called? The designated funds, right? And we want to track how it's going up and down and make sure they go to the right fund account. Well, the question has come up of how time intensive that is for an external bookkeeper to do. So then I said, okay, so then if it's what will make it more efficient, oh, set it up on QuickBooks, but then there's a setup fee of a high price tag to set it up in QuickBooks. So then my question becomes, I know there are standard and customized report capability in QuickBooks Online. If I click here, here, and here, I have the columns, I can filter by date, and I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but it becomes that moment of like, I am getting a 75% increase on a monthly fee from a bookkeeper with less than a month's notice, and they're holding back bill pay for the month. I don't have any choice, right? Yeah, that's the face I made too, Brianna. It's like your accountant, like what? I know the writing on the wall of I'm going to make sure my church can function every day. And so I will do what
Yeah.
I need to, right? But then it also becomes this method of I need to learn more about this program for the financial health of my church. And then how do I carry that over from person to person?
Yeah. I hear you. I do know the QuickBooks training, if that's what you're using, is not the best. I mean, they kind of assume that you know some accounting. And if you're coming in and you were like a zookeeper before, like you don't know accounting, right? Like you're just trying to be a volunteer treasurer. Um, and so I wish that they made it a little bit more non-accounting friendly. Like, you're not an accountant, you're not a full-time CPA, you're just, whatever. They do have a nonprofit training, but I don't know how much that is. I would have to look into it. And I bet honestly you could find it on YouTube for free, but I will look into just some like basic QuickBook trainings. What else? What other programs are people using? I don't even.
Could you
Okay,
also, oh, sorry.
that's okay. I'm Susan, and I did not raise my hand. We don't use QuickBooks. Our annual budget is under 75,000 annually. Okay, we're a small church, small giving. QuickBooks was not a viable option. We don't have the people resources or the money resources. It's set up in Excel.
Okay.
And I have one Excel spreadsheet that's set up. I have a separate tab for each month, and I'm basically have it set up just like an online checkbook. But
Right.
then I have a summary tab where it automatically will generate my reports. So I can give monthly reports to our church council, as you were saying, the board. And quarterly, I have our auditor team receives everything, and then they audit quarterly. But
Okay.
it's all through spreadsheets because it's simple, it's quick. We have no external bookkeeper. I don't have those. We don't have the money like it sounds like some of you are dealing with. So it's much simplified.
And Excel, I mean, Excel spreadsheets are completely fine, especially if it's, like you said, under 75,000. Like that is not enough to kind of justify using some of the software. it's easier, it's more convenient, right? But Excel is completely fine. Excel was built for things like this. It was built for accounting purposes. So that's completely fine as long as it's working for you. As far as other accounting software or just using QuickBooks and kind of, how to use those things, I can certainly look into what trainings I can offer and provide. It might be better, like if you're using QuickBooks or you're using something else. There's a couple that I'm trying to think of their names and I can't. It's totally leaving my brain. But it might be better to find those training videos on YouTube and try and follow them. They have, free versions online. But if we use QuickBooks Online as a conference. So if you have specific questions about that, I can certainly help you the best that I can. So I don't know how much, Elaine, I can offer at this very moment in time, but I can definitely look into some trainings to see what I can do to help.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Robin?
And so I'm a new treasurer, and our bookkeeper is I think I'm going to become the bookkeeper as well. I am an accountant and still have trouble with QuickBooks. I'm as an accountant we use accounting software, not QuickBooks, so it's I know nothing about it. So my question is, on the pledge giving, the statements that we give out, can I do that through QuickBooks, or do I need to keep, another program to keep track of everyone's giving? I don't want to enter it twice, but that's what it looks like we are doing.
So glad you asked this because I am a tracker and I am a person who I want to dot my I's and cross my T's. Within QuickBooks, you can 100% pull a report and send it to each of your whoever you're sending it to. So if you're sending it to all of your members or other people from outside the community that have donated to your church, whatever, you can do that within QuickBooks. No matter which option you choose, it is cumbersome. It's tedious. So you're going to have to print the report to like a PDF for each individual person. It takes some time. Usually when I send out quarterly reports, when you get my really fun email that says RMC quarterly report, just know it took me like 6 hours to send everybody an email with their report. It's a lot of work. But I will show you how I track, because I hate QuickBooks. I hate tracking it this way. So I will show you how I do it within, I'm going to show you my master copy because I don't want to give away everybody's what they do. So this is my master copy. I have everybody's church, your church number, location. This can obviously be changed to member. You can have whatever you want in there, their telephone number, their email address, whatever. This is like how I keep track month to month. This is my spreadsheet so that I know that QuickBooks is good. This is my double check of QuickBooks. It's an extra step, yes. But again, the amount of issues that I've had with QuickBooks, this is worth it to me to track this. So I have this set up so that every month it changes, so that I can see how much we brought in June versus January or whatever. Mine also shows the totals for the whole year. And then mine, obviously, this is just for the church. We have, how it's reconciled at the end of the year. But as you can see, I have a Giving by Church folder in my Google Drive, and every single church has their own sheet. let me see who I can show. Maybe I got rid of everybody. Here, Chris won't care. 6th Avenue. So like 2023, 2024 is down here. And then I have what they've given. And then all I do for this is I hit print and then I save this as a PDF. And then once this is saved, this is what gets emailed to each person on a quarterly basis. I've also been toying with the idea of just giving every treasurer access to their individual church's spreadsheet, so it makes it a little bit easier. You could do the same. You could have something set up so that you're sharing this with only the person that needs to see that spreadsheet, which would be you and the patron, right? So that you could say, hey, here's a link to your Google spreadsheet or your Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is. Can you just verify and send me an email that everything looks correct? End of story. But again, it is tedious because you can't just send an email to the whole congregation with everybody's spreadsheet. You'd have an uproar on your hands. So it's tedious, but it saves me at the end of the year. When I first took over and I had to do 2020, so I started October and then I had to do end of the year in January for 2022. And it took me and Sue, I think, 2 sessions, 4 hours each day. So 8 hours just to finalize numbers. When I did end of year 2023, I was down to like 1 4-hour day. This past 2024, I did it in an hour. I was done. And it's because I have policies like this where I'm double checking throughout the year that every church's numbers are correct. Because if I had waited till the end of the year, the amount of emails that I would have gotten, it's overwhelming. If you're a small church, like I said, if you're small enough where you can do it quarterly or even every 6 months, that's a different story.
So we don't have a church credit card. Chris just uses his own credit card and gets reimbursed. So we're looking at getting a credit card. Would you be willing to share with the group about the Clear card? And then I'd
Yes.
love to know if others have similar cards to the Clear card or any other suggestions.
Yeah, I don't know what the Clear card is, so that would be helpful.
Yeah, so there is an organization called Clear Card. It was started for nonprofits specifically. They work almost exclusively with church organizations. And it is a credit card system through Visa. And it has been a blessing for me and my job. It's made life 10 times easier for all of our staff. Essentially, everybody gets their own card. You can have physical or virtual cards. If you have a virtual card, it's for things that you would like just buy online and all you need is the credit card number. So you wouldn't need an actual physical card. I recommend just doing a physical card, not doing physical and virtual. I've kind of learned my lesson a little bit. But essentially everyone gets a card. You as the financial person or whoever's in charge of the Clear Card system would set their limits. You get to see all of the charges as they're coming in. So every Monday through Friday, every day, I check Clear Card's charges. I see our entire team's credit card charges, and then I'm able to link it to QuickBooks. They are able to link to many, many other systems. I'm not entirely sure all of them, but there's quite a few. But it links directly to our QuickBooks. I'm able to go in, say who, like what the company, the vendor's name, what line item it goes to for our chart of accounts. And then it also tells me who made the purchase, how much the purchase was, and they are able to upload the receipt directly to that charge from their cell phone. So I never have to ask for a receipt from any person in my office, because if they don't upload their receipt, they get a daily email that says, upload this receipt, until they are beaten down enough that they finally upload their receipt. So let me tell you, it's been tremendous. And then they pay the bill. So it gets linked to your QuickBooks account. So I never have to enter any of that data either. It just automatically gets uploaded. I never have to put anything in. And then I have it set up so that it pays the balance every week. So it's an automatic thing. I never have to go in there and hit pay. I never have to worry about a late charge. And then I get a statement once a week that I upload into QuickBooks and also into my little Google Drive that I keep. It is probably my favorite thing that Laura Gurney from First Con Greeley ever told me about. And here's a resource. She's going to hate me if I tell you guys this, but if you ever have a question and you're like, I don't know what to do, Laura Gurney, First Con Greeley, is the best person to call. When I first started, she put me on the right path. She is amazing. She knows all the things. She told me about quite a few things, but ClearCard was the number one thing that she gifted me.
I'm also wondering if it's possible to do a webinar on this, because this alignment of putting our money into companies that align with our faith and social justice, that has been a big thing I want to work on with my church, because I don't know why we're with our bank, but I don't like them, and they don't give us, like, it's not a credit union. The credit card too, they're such a, forgive me, but they're a pain in the ass. And so if I know ClearCard does all this stuff, right, because it's that sharing of a position responsibility, not a person, right? So that, again, the financial literacy of knowing you don't have to be out on the streets protesting in person somewhere to make sure your church is doing something with their money. So if there could be a webinar about different ways a church could orient their money, to set it up in these ways, that would be great. Knowing, like, we have the variability here of smaller churches with medium and larger churches, like, it sounds like there's some great options here. If that could be a webinar.
Yeah, I'm adding it to my list. That's a great suggestion. And it's also something that I could, send out an email and say, what companies are you guys working with that align with UCC standards or are working well, with nonprofits that would benefit other churches, and just kind of get a good idea and maybe compile a list too. Yeah.
I had a question about the ClearCard. What are the charges for that?
Nothing.
It's free?
It's free.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's free. We don't get charged per charge. There are a few things that you can do within ClearCard that you have to pay for. So if you want to do bill pay through ClearCard, which we did try out, so I was a little bit of a guinea pig for you all. Not my favorite. I didn't love the bill pay. Don't pay for it. I want to say it was like $49 a month for bill pay, and it just wasn't worth it. And that was like per user. The other thing that I really, really like is you can have it set up so that somebody has to authorize the charges. So you kind of have that checks and balances. That doesn't work for us within the RMC, just because a lot of our credit card charges are for like travel things. So it wouldn't work if you're like trying to get gas and you're like waiting for someone to approve the charge and it's like 4:00 on a Friday, So we don't have that currently set up. But if you're doing office supplies or something like that, you can set it up so that Sally down, in the other office has more restrictions. And then maybe like John down here is a little bit more free to use his card. So maybe you want to give your pastor a little bit more access to kind of do some things, but you don't want, Jimmy who cleans downstairs to just have free reign with a credit card. You can kind of set up the different restrictions. I highly recommend them. They do have, if you, Kari added to the chat, the website for ClearCard, just investigating them. They have a lot of different questions and answers. And then I think they have a few videos on there too. But when we signed up, I literally talked to the owner of the company, and he's the one that got us all set up. They're based down in the Springs. So they're a Colorado-based local company. We had one snafu where we had somebody do a lot of fraudulent charges, and they had it fixed and cleaned up, and they were pretty good about getting everything back to where it needed to be. And literally I was emailing with the owner of the company saying, help me. It was 2 days before Christmas. It was like 6:00, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like $8,000 in very clearly fraudulent charges. Help. And by New Year's Day, everything was cleaned up. So, I mean, it was great.
Could you do a webinar on the Pension Board 101? Yeah, okay.
Can somebody at the pension board give me a pension board 101?
Because let's
Because
let's also be clear, we tried that, and what they said is not what they're doing. So I just needed to make sure y'all were feeling the same way, because holy cow.
I think for the first 18 months that I worked with the RMC, I cried every time we got a pension board bill. I now have it fixed to the point where it's a lot easier for me to just pay the bill. But every single time I get an email, I cringe a little bit because their system is awful. Their
Yeah.
bill pay is awful. Their customer service is awful. I mean, honestly, heaven help you if you have a new employee that needs benefits, or you have somebody who leaves and you need to take benefits off. It is a nightmare.
Or both.
So
Yeah.
just know that I feel for you. The pension board is at the top of my list of the things that I really don't like. But unfortunately, that's who we have to deal with for health and benefits throughout the UCC. I mean, that's just, we have to suck it up and deal with it. You should
Good.
have a rep. You should have a pension board rep. I utilize my rep a lot if we have snafus. So we had somebody leave, and so I had to get rid of benefits, and it was a nightmare, and they were the only one that kind of helped me along in that process. So really, if there is an issue, I highly suggest just kind of reaching out to your rep. But just know it's not just you. I think every single person who has to pay that bill cries a little.
Yeah, we do. It's one of the main reasons I set up a weekly call with our admin to make sure that, like, she would tell me, okay, they messed up this again. And so I talked to them, and I'm at a point, like, she had to call them every day, and they knew it. And then they finally said, we fixed this, we're working on that. It's uh honestly, it's just validating to know we're not alone, and that the one silver lining of pension board is that our clergy and staff who get their services from those companies, it's gold star. Like, our staff are taken care of. And that is the one thing that I'm like, well, for this amount of pain, you better be providing them with the best benefits, right? So
Yeah.
that for us is somewhat of an amelioration of the pain of calling them, because our rep is not accurate in like saying what is going to happen and doing what she says. And so that's been the compounded effort of offboarding and onboarding for us. So I'll stop there.
You're fine. So, my plan is to kind of take some of the feedback from this morning session and then the session I'm doing tonight and using it to kind of create an actual training program. I believe there's like 2 or 3 conferences that have a few training things that I can send out for now and just kind of let you guys see. But the hard part with that is a lot of times it's specific, some of it is specific to their conference. But just know that I am working on an actual training program. I'm hoping to have something set up for annual celebration as well. I'm going to be sitting there, twiddling my thumbs anyways. So I might as well be open for anyone who has questions. So if obviously the treasurers are not going to be there, you can send whoever from your church is going to be there with a list of questions that they can ask too, because I'll be there sitting.
Brianna, it'd be helpful if I wonder if you could offer like a session at annual celebration, because I learn a lot from hearing other people's
Yeah.
questions. And just so that we know who the resources are. Like one thing that I had to do from scratch for 6th Ave were policies and procedures for a small church. And the samples I had were all from large churches. So I've been working at trying to adapt them to a smaller church. And it would just be nice to be able to share resources like that.
Yep.
So if you can talk your way onto the schedule, I think there's clearly a need for your services.
What should we call it? A treasure, a community of practice, Brianna? Or is that a misnomer? Like it sounds like there are problems or issues that we're all coming across and we're trying to find solutions together. And then
I would love to maybe, send out an email and say, what are you good at? What have you put together on your own? Can you share those things with us?
yeah, yeah.
And then also, what are you needing? What kind of just what are you questioning? What kind of resources are you in need of? What problems are you having? And maybe connect some people that could work together. Maybe connect a small church with another small church that could share certain resources.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't afford a bookkeeper for your church, but maybe 2 churches can come together and share a financial person or something, or just getting help. Maybe a big church can somehow help a small church. Like, how can we combine and help with resources here?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're also
Yeah.
reminding me that someone had mentioned the Excel spreadsheet for the church budgeting, and that made me think also Excel macros, the basics also for not just church budgets, but also annual budgeting efforts and
Mhm.
understanding the basics of, you have 1 sheet, but then you're going to have 5 sheets, and then you want it to appear on 6 sheets. Like that, I could see a community coming together and making sure, right? Because I think the basic idea here is understanding the financial integrity of the documents and why that's important,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
You had some great ideas today. I'm so excited. Thank you.
Brianna, did
Dana.
you say that people put their contact info in the chat?
Yep. And I should be able to share the recording and the chat in the email. So I should be able to send that.
I was just going to say, yeah, we're a small church too, a slightly larger budget of right around 100 grand, and we do it all in an Excel spreadsheet. But there's also a different division of, we've got like 70 members, mostly elderly. So we're strapping the same people for the board members and so forth. And in fact, when Donna Bristow retired last March, and most of you know her, we don't even have an admin. So we are kind of, doling out her different duties to different people. I think what's critical about the financial stuff is that you have a division of who has access to the money and who authorizes. And so ours is a little bit different in that as the treasurer, I'm basically the bookkeeper and the treasurer, and I write the checks for the bills and sign them, but I have no access to the deposits. We have what we call a financial secretary. So he collects the offering on Sundays. He makes the deposits. He has access to Tithely, and he and the pastor are the only two that know people's donations, their pledges. And so he has the income part of it, and I have no control over that. And then
I'm going to stop you really fast. That needs to change. You
What?
as the treasurer, you should have a full scope of everything that's happening, income and expenses. You should not be in the dark about what's happening on income or expenses. You should know the full picture. That gets messy because you're missing information.
He is the one that sends out the statements to the people. Our bylaws state that I'm not to know who the contributions are from, but it matches up with the bank statement. I see all the Tithelies and all the deposits on the bank statement. I just don't know, and he gives me a report as to how much was pledged, how much was in the plate, that sort of thing. But I don't know who gave it is the thing.
I think as long as you know what the income is and you're keeping track of what the income is, that's okay.
Yeah.
But
And it's all annotated on his what are we calling it? I can't think of the name of his report, but so it has columns and, so much was pledged, so much was the rent, because we have an auxiliary building that we rent out. So much was in the insurance column. So much was a donation to one of the 5 for 5s or whatever, so I know exactly how much money in each category, and I can verify on the bank statement the income. But what I was saying is we don't have a separate bookkeeper or treasurer, and I am one of the signers on the account, and that's why we keep the income separate from the outgo on this end. But I have a statement that everybody that is now, obviously, like the utility bills and phone bill and stuff like that come in, and they're actually set up on auto pay now. But any other money, any reimbursement for an expense or anything we want to spend money on, it has a statement, and they have to sign, author that committee or whatever has to authorize that payment. But then I write the check and send it out.
so as long as the approver and the signer are different people, that's okay. As long as
Yeah, sometimes I have to pay for something like online because we don't have a credit card. That's why I was curious about this Clear card. We don't have a credit card. So if I have to order something, or if I'm the designated person to go, pick up supplies for something and I have a receipt, I still write the check, but I have the other signer on the account sign the check. I don't sign a check made out to myself.
yeah, you cannot sign a check to yourself. But it sounds okay. I mean, as long as there is some sort of written policy that says that these are the approvers, these are the signers, and then obviously you have some sort of footnote in there, like you can't sign for yourself or whatever, then it's okay. And as long as you're seeing the bank statement, so you're seeing what's coming in and then what's coming out, it
Right.
sounds like things are all right.
And then my report to the executive council that meets once a month. So I do it in Excel. So on one page, I have basically a check register, what check number or what online
Mhm.
payment, who it's to, and a running tally of the total that we have in the bank. And then on the reverse of that, I print we have our annual budget, and then the next column is to date. And so each month has a column, and I print out just, that so they can see, they'll just see numbers on that page. Oh, so much came out of choir, so much came out of women's, but then they can look at the other sheet. It's just a 2-page thing, and they get it every month, and they can see exactly where our money's going.
That sounds fine. I mean, I would maybe, yeah, you have your check register, so it'd be almost just like a, bank statement kind of situation. So I think that would be all right.
Okay. Thank you.